Greetings, Dr. Lee, and to my team members. In part 2, we focused on whether our company Research Frontiers was organizationally ready to scale. In this part of our presentation, we shift from looking inside the company to looking outside at the market. Our main question today is this: even if PMF Holdings can improve execution, is the market attractive enough to justify the investment? To answer that, we looked at several sources. We reviewed Research Frontiers' annual report and quarterly report to understand the company's market positioning and end-use applications. We looked at government and industry sources to understand the broader smart glass market. And we reviewed competitor materials from companies like Gentex and View to compare positioning. Based on all of that, our conclusion is that opportunity is real, but it is selective. So Research Frontiers should not try to win the entire smart glass market. Instead, it should focus where its technology fits best, especially in the premium automotive and retrofit architectural applications. That will be the lens for the rest of our discussion. We are going to explore the macro environment like PESTEL environment and Porter analysis, and then the conclusion that I said we're going to explore this. So, Sharma, let's start with the broader picture. When you looked at the macro environment, what did you see as the biggest external forces shaping this market?
Yeah, so what stood out for us in that overall environmental is favorable, but not equally favorable across all the segments. Politically and regulatory, one of the most long-term tailwind is energy efficiency. When we look at the US Department of Energy, material on windows and building performances, it was clear that windows matter a lot in overall building energy use. The Department of Energy notes that the windows are responsible for about 10% of the energy use in buildings and influence end uses that make up around like 40% of building energy uses. That gives real support to technology that can reduce heat gain and improve comfort. Dynamic glazing fits directly into the conversation. In transportation, especially electric vehicles, the story is similar. Any technology that can improve thermal conditions in the cabin becomes more relevant because it can help with comfort and may indirectly support efficiency and range. So more from a policy and regulatory perspective, smart glass benefits from large standards around sustainability, efficiency, and better building and vehicle performance. From an economic perspective, though the market is still price sensitive, smart glass is still a premium feature in most cases rather than a standard one. So when the economy weakens, building owners may delay retrofit projects and automakers may reduce the optional premium features in low-tier vehicle lines. That means the long-term growth trend can still be positive even while the short-term adopts remain cyclic.
Okay, so for PESTEL, you covered political part and economic part.
Yeah, exactly.
What would be the next step?
Moving onward, we'll be looking at socially and the technological part from this. So socially, there are also strong tailwinds. In buildings, people want like natural light without glare and overheating. In vehicles, especially high-end vehicles, customers expect a better cabin experience and more premium materials. So the social trend supports smart glass as a premium comfort and wellness feature rather than a commodity product. Now, from a perspective of technology, however, the market is clearly competitive. Research Frontiers SPD technology has advanced in switching speed and shading performances. But when we reviewed the company's annual report and industry materials, it was clear that SPD is competing with other smart glasses and light controlled by technologies, not just a plain glass companies. So the micro environment helps create demand for smart glazing, but it does not automatically guarantees the SPD will be in that demand. From an environmental and legal perspective, the case stays favorable. Carbon reduction goals, green building stable standards, and sustainability pressures all support the category. So our macro conclusion is that environment is attractive enough to support the growth, but the technologies that wins will be the one that can prove performance and commercial practically at the same time. That is why the industry structure matters so much for this.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for giving such a wonderful and detailed PESTEL analysis. So you say the macro environment is supportive, but it still doesn't tell us whether this is an easy market to compete in. And I was discussing this with Divyansh, and we went through Porter's book, The Competitive Advantage of Nations. And Porter says in this book, he opens with the need for a new paradigm and search for a convincing explanation by asking the right questions. So I want to ask this to Divyansh. Once we move into industry structure itself, how attractive is this industry really is?
Yeah. So the short answer is that the industry is promising, but it is not easy. When we applied Porter's 5 forces, what came through very clearly was that this market has a growth potential, but is also meaningful structural pressure again. Let me start with the threat of new entrants. We would rate that a low to moderate. There are real barriers to entry. When we looked at the Research Frontiers annual report, it was clear that this is not a market where a new company can casually show up and commercialize quickly. You need technology, intellectual property, qualification work, and relationships with manufacturers and original equipment makers. In automotive, especially, product validation takes time. At the same time, once one pathway has been proven, new errants can still appear using alternative materials or competing smart glass architectures. So there are barriers, but not barriers so strong that the market becomes protected. The bargaining power of supply is high, and for Research Frontier, this is especially important. In the company's annual report and quarterly report, we saw how dependent the model is on the broader SPD ecosystem. The annual report explains that Research Frontier does not directly manufacture products and depends on the licenses to make and sell SPD-based products. It also states that the company cannot control whether a licensee will develop SPD products and notes that production can be affected when a significant license fails or when production must be shifted. In the quarterly report, the company specifically discussed Agazi and Vision Systems as important contributors to fee income.
Yeah, those two, Gauzy and Vision Systems, they are the two suppliers,
Yeah.
the only two suppliers.
Yeah. So the suppliers and the partner concentration is not just a theoretical issue, it is a real structural constant. The bargaining power of buyers is also high. In architecture, large developers and contractors have negotiating power because they can choose between multiple glazing and shading solutions. In automotive, original equipment manufacturers are very demanding buyers. They negotiate on cost, reliability, warranty, integration, and long-term performances. Smart glass still has to earn its place inside a broader bill of materials, so buyers can absolutely delay adoption if the economics or reliability are not strong enough.
Okay.
The threat of substitutes is high as well. We reviewed competitor materials from Gentex, and Gentex explicitly position itself as a leader in dimmable devices, including electrofoamic products for automotive and aerospace. Their messaging makes it clear that other active light control solutions are already commercial and credible alternative. On the top of that, traditional shading systems and high performance coatings remains visible substitute in many contexts. Competitive rivalry, in our view, is moderate. This is not a mass market with dozens of huge players are all fighting on price, but the rivalry that does exist is still meaningful because technologies are differentiated and qualification cycles are long. Companies are competing for a specific program, specific customer and specific application. So our conclusion is that this market is attractive enough for focused investment but not attractive enough for an unfocused strategy. Success depends on choosing the right niches, protecting supply and being very selective about where the technology has the strongest fit.
Got it. Thank you. That gives us a really useful frame, and thank you for researching the Porter framework in such a detailed manner. So this is a market where genuine opportunity but also real structural pressure lies. Lakshdeep, let's make that more concrete. When we compared Research Frontiers to competitors, and Porter specifically talks about how important the competition is, and we figured out two companies, Gentex and View, who would be our strongest competitors in this. So who these companies that we choose, why did we choose them? Could you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, sure. For our analysis, the two most useful competitors were Gentex and View, and we chose them because they represent two different kind of competition. Gentex is stronger benchmark for dimmable glass and electro-optical products in automotive and aerospace, and whereas View is more useful on architectural side because it represents dynamic glass model tied more directly to buildings and smart building values. Neither one is perfect one-to-one match, and that is actually important to say out loud. And Research Frontiers is not vertically integrated the way these companies are. It is primarily a licensing business, and but that is exactly why these companies are useful. Gentex help us see what scale and commercialization's maturity look like in transportation related dimmable glasses, and while View help us to see what system level marketing positioning look like in architectures.
Awesome. Thank you for researching on both these companies. Could you tell us a bit more in detail what these companies are?
Oh, sure. If we start with the market presence, Research Frontiers is clearly the smaller and more niche player. Gentex is operating at completely different scale. In Gentex own 2025 products and say it ships over 50 million dimmable devices annually. It also highlights in its next generation dimmable sunroof glass and aerospace applications that give Gentex manufacturing credibilities, scale and long-term consumer relationship that Research Frontiers simply doesn't have. And whereas the View is more relevant architectural comparison. In the material we received from View, the company positions its dynamic glass around comfort, natural light, thermal comfort and energy savings in buildings. It also talks about having hundreds of projects installed or in development, which shows more direct building market presence. So if Gentex shows us scale in transportation, View shows us system level traction in architecture. And on value proportion, Research Frontiers' strongest claim is still the specific performance of SPD, and the company technology is compelling because it swings quickly and provides strong tinting and light control, which is especially appealing in automotive and premium glazing application. Gentex messaging emphasizes durability, clarity and mature performance. View's value proportion is broader because it ties the glass to the large smart building story. So Research Frontiers has a narrow value proportion, but in the right segment, the narrow value proportion can still be powerful. And when we looked at the product and services differentiation, Research Frontiers stands out for being an asset-light intellectual property and licensing platform that help keep the business lean. But it also means the company gives us control over manufacturing, distribution, and final customer delivery. And Gentex controls much more of path to commercialization. View is also more system oriented in how it brings product to the market. So Research Frontiers differentiation is real, but it brings both opportunities and risks. And on pricing, Research Frontiers appear best suited for premium application. SPD is not the lowest cost option, and that makes it harder to imagine immediate mass market penetration. But it also makes the company potentially stronger in luxury vehicles, especially transportation, aerospace, and selected retrofit projects where performance matters more than lowest upfront cost. And let's discuss the distribution part. Distribution is another key difference. Research Frontiers reaches the market through licenses. Gentex reaches the market through its own manufacturing and OEM relationship, and whereas View historically worked more directly into the building ecosystem. This means Research Frontiers has less control over route to market the either competitors. And finally, on innovation and technology maturity, all three have strengths, but they are different strengths. Research Frontiers have deep patents coverage and long history with SPD technology, and its annual report says its technology is licensed across 5 major applications area globally. Gentex is clearly further ahead in commercialization maturity, which appear more mature in architectural market integration. So our competitive conclusion is that Research Frontiers should not try to outscale Gentex or integrate View. It should focus on places where SPD specific strength matters most and where the licensing model can still generate value.
That was such a fantastic evaluation of both our competitors, Gentex and View. Wonderfully done, Lakshmi. So, as we understood how our competitors are, we do not want to we need to find our own space, as you both, Divyansh and Lakshmi, you both mentioned that. I want to circle back to Sharma.
Yeah.
And given that competitive picture, where do you see the market going? And just as importantly, where do you think Research Frontiers can realistically fit into this future?
Yeah. So the long-term market is potential, is meaningful, but only if we segment it carefully. When we review the industry reports from Grandview Research, the smart glass market is estimated at $7.3 billion USD in 2024, and it's projected to reach $13 billion by 2030. So that's a big market cap, growing at this compound annual growth rate of 9.6%. The same report noted that transportation was the largest application segment in 2024. That matters because it supports the idea that mobility-related smart glasses is not just experimental, it is already a meaningful part of the market. Now, when we connect that back to Research Frontiers, our own annual report, the company describes a wide range of possible end markets, including automotives, aircrafts, marine, trains, houses, offices, and including museums and other building uses as well. It also highlights something especially important for our forecast. In late 2025, Research Frontiers and its partners introduced a prefabricated SPD smart glass retrofit system designed to convert existing buildings glazing without full replacements.
Wow.
So that's going to be a game changer for Frontiers.
Yeah, I mean, so having that technology, we were discussing about this, that you push a button and then there is like voltage through this thing and the glass becomes tinted.
Exactly.
I mean, we have experienced that in aircrafts, that on a push of a button you can basically set how much tint you want into the window.
Yeah.
And if you have that on the windows, on the larger windows, that would definitely be a game changer.
Really very great. So without investing a big amount of money, you already have the windows on the buildings, you just change it with a new product.
Okay.
So the annual report especially says that this materially expand the potential absorption of market within commercial and as well as government buildings, to just modify and modernize the programs. That point is important because it changes how we think about architecture. If the company rely only on a new structure, adaptation could be smaller and more project dependent. But retrofits open a broader and potential more scalable path, especially if building owners can upgrade glazing without replacing the full window system. So you don't need to replace the full window system anymore. You can just replace it with a window glazing system, and your windows, just with a push of button, it gets glazed. In automotives, the long-term demand story is stronger in premium segments. Larger roof system, panoramic glazing, and thermal comfort all supports the relevance of SPD. in electric vehicles especially, glass areas is increasing and heat management matters more. Research Frontiers does not need to dominate the automotive market to create value. Even a small presence in premium vehicle programs can matter if the Royal model scales. So our forecast is not based on Research Frontiers suddenly taking over the global smart glass market. It is based on selective penetrations. We see the strongest growth opportunity in premium automotive roofs and glazing, followed by retrofit architecture in commercials and institutional settings. Aerospace and marine remain attractive, but they are more niche. More PMF. For the PMF, this means the market opportunity is real, but it should be approached as focused to growth strategy, not to a broad commodity product for this.
Got it. Focused growth strategy. That's
Exactly.
very interesting. Yeah. Thank you. That does gives us an upside case. Before we wrap up, I do want to ask one more question to Divyansh. What do you think would be the main risk that could prevent this opportunity from materializing the way we expect?
There are 5 major risks we would highlight, and we took these from a combination of companies' report and market source we reviewed.
Okay.
The first step is a technology substitution. If competing smart glass technologies improve faster on cost, durability, or manufacturability, SPD can lose share even if it remains strong on switching speed. That is why we looked at genetics and view is closely. The market is not standing still. The second is economic risk. The smart glass is still a premium offering in many applications. So when capital spending slows down, adoption can be deferred. That is especially relevant in commercial construction and premium automotive features. The third is supply and partner dependence. This comes directly from a Research Frontier annual report. The company says it does not directly manufacture products and depends on licenses to make and market SPD based products. It also says it cannot control whether licenses will actually develop SPD products, and it describes how the bankruptcy of one European license affected royalty recognition until production was transitioned elsewhere. That tells us the market risk is not just about demand, but also about whether the ecosystem can deliver consistently. The fourth is a qualification and adoption timing, especially in automotive. Even if the technology is attractive, it can take years to move from concept to production. That creates a timing gap between technological promise and revenue realization. The fifth is a reputational risk. Because the company is so partner dependent, visible delays, poor rollout, or supply problems can affect a perception beyond a single project. In a niche technology market, reputation matters a lot because each program can shape future adoption. So our bottom line view is that the market is attractive, but it is not forgiving. If a PMF invests here, it needs to support not just commercialization but credibility, partner discipline, and supply resilience.
Thank you so much, Divyansh. I do want to reach to the conclusion, and I do want to thank each and every one of you, Sharma, for giving such a wonderful PESTEL analysis, Divyansh for talking about the Porter analysis, and then Lakshmi for talking about our competitors. So just to conclude, our assessment is that the market opportunity for Research Frontiers is real, but selective and highly execution sensitive. The macro environment supports smart glass adoption through energy efficiency, premium design, and sustainability trends. The industry structure is more challenging because buyers and suppliers both have strong leverage and substitute remains credible. Our competitor analysis shows that Research Frontiers is neither the scale leader nor the most vertically integrated player in this market. Instead, its best opportunity lies in the segment where SPD's performance advantages matter most, particularly premium automotive and retrofit architecture. what gave us confidence in this conclusion is that we did not rely on one source alone. We drew from the company's own reports. We understood its end markets, partner dependence, and retrofit push. We used the Department of Energy for building energy context, and industry report for broader market size and growth, and competitors' materials from Gentex and View to understand what commercial maturity looks like from different angles. Based on all of that, our recommendation is that PMF should pursue a focused scale-up strategy rather than a broad market grab. With that, we would like to thank Dr. Markley. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.